Welcome, I'm Amy Ventitulo, WCTV, and this is the Washoe County Connection, the public affairs show that brings you updates on the county programs and services designed to serve you. And first up today, with the unprecedented 2019 winter affecting the already saturated areas of the county, our Wild Winter segment this month looks at the situation in Swan Lake in Lemmon Valley. With me today is our Assistant County Manager, Dave Solaro, and our Washoe County Director of Engineering, Dwayne Smith. Thank you both for being here.
Good morning. Good morning.
So a quick recap. The 2017 water year was record-breaking, not only here for us, but the entire West Coast. All of our basins started rising. Can you first tell us what is a closed hydro basin and what happened in Swan Lake?
Yeah, so actually a closed hydro basin is pretty simple. It's basically, think of it as a bathtub. There is no outlet on the top side for water to spill out. Lake Tahoe has a spillway, creates the Truckee River, runs into Pyramid Lake. Pyramid Lake is actually in a closed hydro basin. It is a terminal lake. So we have 3 closed hydro basins in the North Valleys, one in Lemmon Valley, one in Stead, and one out in Cold Springs, that there's basically no outlet to that lake. The water all runs to the lowest point of the valley, and that's where it stays. It creates a little lake.
So that is a closed hydro basin. So what happened in the Swan Lake closed hydro basin?
Well, you know, of course, Amy, starting in the winter of 2016 and moving into the spring of 2017 with that unprecedented amounts of precipitation we saw, and of course being a closed basin with no outlet, water levels started to rise. And those water levels continued to come up, and we saw a peak in March of 2017. With that, there was a lot of flooding that occurred over roadways, over properties, and very unfortunately, we had 3 homes within the Swan Lake area that actually had water in the living spaces. In addition, we had folks that couldn't get to their houses because of that floodwater. And so those folks, we ended up working with the state to put those people into apartments or long-term housing until the waters could either be controlled and kind of put back into the lake, or that the evaporation rates would allow for the lake levels to drop naturally. And that's what occurred in the 2017 spring.
I think it's also important to point out that, that part of that unprecedented moisture that we'd gotten actually saturated the soils. And so the soil could not absorb any water. It was like a full sponge. And so that water just ran off the road. It ran off the sagebrush, it ran off the, any open space, all the way down into the bottom of the basin. It did not soak into the ground like most people think, that the water hits the ground and it'll soak in for the most part. But with the saturated soils, it wasn't allowing that to happen.
So the question has come up, why were homes even ever able to be built within a FEMA designated floodplain?
FEMA designated floodplains are those that have greater than or equal to 1% chance or greater to be flooded over a 100-year period. And so ultimately that is a tool that allows us to implement other elements of development code, put additional restrictions on those people or those businesses that want to build within a floodplain. Washoe County has adopted FEMA codes. That allows us to utilize FEMA's knowledge and experience, incorporating that into our codes to condition those developments to successfully build within FEMA designated floodplains. There were certainly pieces of code prior to the adoption of FEMA standards that recognized that there were areas of greater impact from flooding, from stormwater. So those pieces were in the code, but of course as time has gone by, with information, better knowledge, better mapping, better hydrology studies, those areas that are within FEMA designated flood zones have become more clear and more predictive to allow us to do better job conditioning those new developments. So we've learned lessons over time, and we've incorporated those lessons learned into our development codes, just like every municipality across the country has done.
So what's the biggest difference now than in 2017, and why should our residents feel safer?
I think one of the most important things is that in 2017 we put some protections in place to keep the water off the roadways and keep the water out of the neighborhoods. We've gotten direction from our Board of County Commissioners to keep those protections in place to protect the homes, protect the neighborhoods. So we are currently managing the water within that existing flood protection barrier system. And I think that it's important to understand that there wasn't any additional flooding. Now, the barrier system creates its own host of issues. We're trying to remember all the water was flowing to the bottom of the lake, and now we've created a barrier so that not floodwater, just the rainwater actually coming down. Now it's hitting against a barrier. It can't get into the lake because there's a barrier. So we've had to pump it in, and sometimes the amount of water pumping, there's been concerns that it's taken too long, but we have not gotten to the point where we've gotten any water in any homes or anything like that. Again, it's managing the water out there in a way to keep it off the roadways and out of the neighborhoods, get it in the lake, keep it contained to kind of the lake. Although we've made the lake a little bit smaller, which has got its own issues. We'll talk about those a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Was there an option to help residents with their private property that was surrounding Swan Lake that was affected?
In 2017, based on some conversations with some of the homeowners and with the state and also with FEMA, we started looking very closely at some options that would allow Washoe County, working together with the state through FEMA, to identify specific homes or specific properties that could be purchased at fair market value. Then those areas would be designated as unbuildable, and then Washoe County would go in and remove the structures, remove the fences, remove all the things on the property, and basically create open areas that would allow for future floodwaters to not create damage to homes and to property. But right now we have 4 property owners that are part of the home acquisition and demolition program, and we're moving forward with those 4 properties now. Because this is a voluntary program, and so if somebody chooses to be in the program, it's by their choice. But Washoe County has created the standards by which people can enter the program. We had initially some more folks that were interested that didn't meet the criteria that was established. And then some of the folks that did meet the criteria have chosen to pursue different alternative routes for what they believe are ways to mitigate some of their impacts. But we're very encouraged that we can continue to move forward with these 4 folks, 4 property owners, that we can ultimately acquire their properties, turn those areas into open space, and that will create some of those floodplain areas to allow future floodwaters to sit and not impact people's properties. The FEMA requirement is that those properties are deed restricted in perpetuity, so there will never be any more building on those properties.
So shifting gears to costs, let's talk a little bit about what the costs have been managing Swan Lake and what are the ongoing maintenance costs.
Yeah, so in early 2017, during the emergency declaration out there, the state of Nevada actually came in, they spent some monies. Washoe County, Truckee Meadows Fire, a lot of different agencies spent quite a substantial amount of money out in the Swan Lake area. We're talking $3 to $4 million just capital outlay, some contract work, additional actual labor associated with responding to this flood. And so that's still out there in place. All of that is out there. Those are the HESCO barriers you'll hear about, and also some work that we'd done with some earthen dams or earthen barriers that we'd put into place. But really more important is the discussion we had earlier, where the water from the outside now is trying to get into the lake and there's no way to get there. So we've actually got to rent, we decided to rent and staff pumps out there in the basin with a third-party company. Our Washoe County crews have a lot of land to cover out there in Washoe County, so we're trying to cover all of Washoe County. So it was felt that it would be better to do this by contract. So we've got a contractor out there actually maintaining the pump system to pump the water into the basin. We've actually got some seepage that occurs underneath the barrier system. As anything, it's not a watertight system. The roadways were not built watertight, so that's an ongoing cost. It costs Washoe County roughly between $70,000 and $120,000 a month. To maintain that system. We've got a diver that has to go out, and all the culverts that were under the roadways, they've got plugs in them. He's got to go out and actually dive in the lake and check those plugs on a monthly basis to make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. So these are all the activities that are ongoing out there. Anytime someone hits a barrier or by accident or whatever, we've got to go out there and fix that. All of those costs are associated with the roughly $70,000 to $120,000 a month for ongoing maintenance.
This is our commitment, and we do this as Dave said, on a daily basis. And it does it does reflect the values of Washoe County and what we're trying to accomplish to help the residents in that area.
So you mentioned earlier about the barriers. Tell us a little bit about the durability of those barriers surrounding Swan Lake.
The HESCO barriers were chosen for several reasons. First of all, they're very durable. They're basically a wire basket with a geofabric that's then filled with any type of material, preferably sand or those types of materials that will resist water moving through it. And so miles, there's over 5 miles of HESCO barrier installed in the area. And certainly those barriers have been out there since the first part of 2017. They're still there today doing exactly the job that they're supposed to do. There's been a lot of discussion that the barriers will fall apart and catastrophically fail. Of course, that's not what will happen with those barriers. They're UV protected for about 7 years or so, and certainly the life of those can be extended even longer just with the application of simple latex paint. So these barriers are they're very durable. They will last for a long time.
So you mentioned that a little bit ago, that those barriers aren't watertight, the road's not watertight. There have been some seepage out there, so tell us what residents can do if they're feeling concerned about the seepage.
Certainly if the residents are concerned, Washoe County's got a great service, simply dialing 311 or emailing washoe311@washoecounty.us to alert us of an issue out there, and we will make sure someone goes out and double checks. We have kind of cataloged all of the locations where we know some really seepage is going on, so certainly we can go out there and check it and just make sure it's not an issue. So certainly, the residents out there are our eyes and ears as well. And we get quite a few phone calls, and we respond to those phone calls, with some action out there.
So one of the biggest questions that we get asked is, when are the barriers around Swan Lake coming down? Can you tell us a little bit about when we anticipate that happening?
It's very hard to predict when those barriers will come down based on lake levels dropping. But please know that we're working with folks like at DRI, the Desert Research Institute. Of course, we keep very close communication with the National Weather Service, our local National Weather Service office, and trying to understand not just what we're looking at, within a week, which is a great tool to help us respond and be prepared, but to also try to understand where we may be going in the future as well with precipitation patterns. And some of those things that the Weather Service has said is, we're seeing higher snow levels, so that means warmer storms, and we're seeing more intense rain and precipitation events. Well, both of those things are not good for closed hydrobasins. So there's work that's been ongoing looking at what type of things might be done to alleviate some of these concerns with higher lake levels moving in the future. There's a lot of engineering work that goes into that. And FEMA has a mitigation program, and we've initiated, with our emergency manager, Aaron Kinniston, leading those efforts, have initiated mitigation planning work for closed hydrobasins. So that process will also include community input, professional input from scientists and engineers, and also give an opportunity for the decision makers, the local politicians that are on the Board of County Commissioners or the City of Reno Council, to have say into what direction we're all going in.
So in terms of solutions and long-term planning in Swan Lake, there's certainly been no shortage of ideas, whether it be from our engineering team, the community, many different experts. What are our best options for getting rid or better containing that water in Swan Lake?
We certainly here at Washoe County appreciate the patience, and we also appreciate the toughness of our residents that live in the area. A few years ago when they were driving to work in the morning or going to school, they weren't driving next to HESCO barriers. They didn't look out and see all this water in Swan Lake. So we certainly appreciate the fact that this has impacted and changed the way that our folks live and go to work and go to school on a daily basis. A lot of people have said, well, there's a quick answer. Just go pump this water out or drill holes or build dams or do these things. And while that's true, once the actual solution or the outcome has been selected, the problem is that all of these things cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time and a lot of planning. And as Washoe County, we want to make sure that we get it right. And we don't want to just pull a trigger and then find out years later that we pulled the wrong trigger, that there were unintended consequences that go along with that.
You know, we will get that direction from the board in the near future. We will then take that and crunch it through with the mitigation planning work. We will create a project, bring that project back to the board. Now, it's one thing to create a project, it's another thing to actually fund and build a project. And so that's going to be the other question that's going to come forward, is how do we want to fund this project within Washoe County? Washoe County's got a lot of needs out there, you know, just with limited resources for funding. And so there's going to be a hard decision at some point on how we actually fund a sustainable project out at Swan Lake. And then that same model, if need be, will have to translate to Silver Lake and White Lake potentially if those basins continue to rise. But it's one of those things. It's easy to jump to the solution, you know, and create a project or something, but you really have to understand the end result you're looking for before you can actually get a viable project put together. You know, there are some steps we've got to take, and that's where we're headed right now, is to get concrete. You know, this is what we want to do, and then we'll bring back a project that will accomplish that, and then you know, a potential funding strategy for the board to give us the direction on.
Perfect. So it sounds like you're going to be coming back to the board soon, in the next month or so, with some options,
Yes.
and then we'll be moving forward from there.
That is correct. You know, it's you know, that's what the board is asking for, and the board's asking for the solution right now. But need to have that, you know, need to have that understanding of what we're trying to solve. Obviously, it's, you know, water in Swan Lake is what we're trying to solve. But do we want to create a lake out there? Do we, you know, what does that look like? There's different things that we can do, and we just need to know which one, and we can make it happen.
Certainly a complex issue. Thank you so much for being here and sharing some more in-depth insight into the situation in Swan Lake.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more as we come back to the Washoe County Connection.